Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too. Thanks for talking to us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Okay, so first question for you. What got you into landscape architecture?
Good question. So I came to Purdue in 1979 as a student. I know long before all of you were probably born. And I was accepted in a program that was called environmental science, which I thought was, kind of exterior design kind of stuff. But when I got here, I realized that's not what that program was. And so just looked around and asked some questions. And you've been to Purdue's campus, as I understand it, Michael, and familiar with the big model of the whole campus in the Great Hall of the Union building. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, it's a scaled model of the entire campus. Well, I always loved doing models as a kid, so I was always intrigued by that model. So I asked someone who was responsible for this model. And they said, oh, the campus landscape architect. And I was like, landscape architect, what's that? I looked into it and realized I thought that looked like a good fit for what I was interested in. So I transferred into it the next semester. So that's how I found out about landscape architecture. And ultimately that model in the union became my responsibility, and which became a real difficult thing for me to deal with. So we ended up hiring people every 3 or 4 years to update it. So.
Okay, next question. How did you become the director of campus master planning? Seems like a kind of big gap from landscape architect student to campus planning.
Yeah. Well, it's really not that big of a jump. I think a lot of people aren't necessarily clear what landscape architecture is. It's a very broad field. Most people think of it and they hear the word landscape and think, oh, they plant trees and shrubs. That's a small part of it. It's an important part, but it's just a small part of landscape architecture. Most of what landscape architecture deals with is, how humans interact with their spaces outside of the interior of a building. So it can be anything from the placement of a building to where sidewalks and streets and drives and all of those kinds of things should go, where the building should be sited on a particular property. And then you can get down into the details, the final details of a project of, all the soil and the site work and the grading and drainage and selection of plant materials even. We learn about those kinds of things. I always kind of describe landscape architecture as a profession where you learn a lot about many things, but we aren't completely focused on all the things that engineering does, and we aren't completely focused on all the things that architects do, or all the things that horticulturists do. But we work well with all of those different professions because we can speak the language of each of them enough to help manage a project to a successful completion.
Okay then. So, if I'm not mistaken, you were the one who was put in charge of the bicycle task force once it was created. How did that end up happening? What led to the bicycle task force actually being created?
Sure. So it's kind of a long story. The bicycle infrastructure on campus was something that kind of fell under the domain of the University Architect's Office or the Office of Capital Planning, or whatever the umbrella title of our organization was called at the time. It had many different names over the many years that I was there. And so just like the university deals with sidewalks and streets and parking, surface parking for vehicles, parking garages for vehicles, we also dealt with circulation for bicycles, and just as much as we did for pedestrians and vehicles, and also bicycle parking. And so for years, we had been working with the campus community to try to accommodate bicycles as best we can. And bicycle usage kind of tends to ebb and flow over the years. You could probably track that over many years and see how it increases and decreases, oftentimes dependent on the cost of gasoline. And so, you know, for many, many years, we had been tracking how much parking is accommodated, how many bicycles are parked on campus, and every parking lot for bikes on the entire campus. So we broke it down into the residence halls, which we counted in the early morning hours when we thought most of the bikes would be there. And then the academic campus portion, which we would count during peak use time during the day. And we counted every bike parked in every bike parking lot on the entire campus. From that, we could figure out where people were going, which was kind of obvious based on where the highest number of classroom facilities were or labs. And as a result of that, then we were able to try to identify how and where would be the most critical links for bicycle circulation. Keeping in mind that Purdue was already a well-established campus. It's a very dense campus and has been for many, many years. We're probably physically one of the smallest campuses in the Big Ten area-wise, not population-wise, but area-wise. And so our buildings on the main academic campus were very close together, which is great from a circulation standpoint. And the fact that Purdue still, I think to this day, maintains a 10-minute class break, which is unheard of at many other Big Ten universities where their campuses are huge and sprawling. And if they do have a 10-minute class break, you may have to be in a sector, like you can't have a class at this hour, and the next one can't be in a different sector of the campus. Whereas at Purdue, when the class bell rang, you could get from point A to point B on our campus within 10 minutes, typically. I mean, it would be difficult from the far extreme south end to the extreme north end, but most of the academic facilities with classrooms were centered or clustered more towards the center of the campus. So most people were somewhere in the middle of the campus when the bell would ring. So I know this sounds like a long roundabout way to get to where I'm going. The fact that we had so many limitations with space on our campus because we don't have lots of big open green space, that kind of dictated where we thought we could accommodate bicycle circulation. So for years, every fall, this became an issue. When the students would come back, they're all coming from all over the country, all over the world. They all learned how to ride bikes from different places. Some people said, it was okay to ride on sidewalks. Other people said it wasn't. We tried to keep them separated as best we could. But when you have, at that time, 40,000 students wandering around a fairly small area, it's difficult to keep them separated. This happened every fall. So where I'm going with this, with your original question is, the reason this task force was created was because we had a new president at the time. Mitch Daniels had only been there for a short time. He had never experienced this. He was getting calls and complaints that every previous administration had gotten every fall. And, I think he decided that, well, something needs to be done about this, even though after a few weeks at the beginning of the semester, it always kind of evens out and things cool off. Obviously, it gets cool up here. And after about November or December, very few people ride their bikes anywhere until spring. And oftentimes, students we found would take their bikes home over the break, and then they wouldn't bring them back. So I also should have prefaced this at the beginning. I haven't been in that position since 2014. Mm-hmm. A lot has changed, and I'm speaking on what I knew then. You might want to talk to folks at Purdue today to make sure that what I'm telling you still is true today. But the reason we came up with that task force was because the president was concerned about what he was hearing from the campus community, which again was typical for every previous administration prior to that, for all many years I'd been there. But he just thought that we needed to try to address it more succinctly. And so he established this task force and asked us to kind of oversee it. And so we did. So we created a committee. We worked with folks. We talked with them. We shared with them all the data and the information that we had. And then we created a network of bike paths. But at the time when we implemented this, Many of them were installed as temporary bike paths, but I've been over on campus recently and they're still there. So, the goal was to ultimately incorporate a more permanent solution. We did this very quick plan to get as many designated bike paths as we could with paint, simply with paint, marking on existing service drives or pedestrian ways, wherever we could. Now they have done a couple of them, because they've done big site development projects that will allow that to be accommodated. But, many of those bike paths, I think that you referenced, Michael, were just painted right on the pavement. And like I said, they're still there almost 10 years later. So it must still be working is what I'm doing. But I can tell you, it never works perfectly. It just doesn't. It's completely based on people being respectful of the lines painted on the ground. Some pedestrians stay out of the bike paths, some people don't. Some bicyclists stay in the bike lanes or bike paths, and some of them don't. But it only takes a few bad apples for it to spoil it for everyone. And I think that's probably still what you would hear from the folks on campus today.
How was the task force structured? Were there like heads and then like people who would like go out and like do research or something? Or
no, as I recall, it was just a handful of students and faculty and staff. I don't even remember it. I don't know if any of the articles that you read named all of the folks, but I think there were probably 10 or 12 of us. It was, as I recall anyway, most of it was we simply shared with them the data and the information that we had.
You had collected the data before the task force was made?
Yeah, we've been collecting the information every year about bicycle circulation. We could always show you that there were way more bicycles on campus in the fall than there were in the spring. That was consistent every year that we did bicycle counts. And I think we started doing the counts in the mid to late 1990s. They probably are still doing them. We could tell that on years when the counts were high, we knew it was going to be a bad year for bike and pedestrian conflict or bike and vehicular conflicts. I can tell you that in the course of my tenure as director of campus master planning and even my prior time before that when I was the campus landscape architect, where in essence, I was still functioning as kind of a planner for the campus. Along with other people. I didn't do any of this in a vacuum. We had staff and support from the administration and all kinds of people that helped us achieve all the things we tried to do. But the whole time I was on Purdue's campus from 1984 when I was hired until I retired in 2016, our primary goal was to try to make Purdue a much more pedestrian-friendly campus. And I can tell you, we were very successful in doing that. When I started, our campus was not an attractive campus. There were very, very, very few green spaces. It was primarily surface parking lots, sidewalks, and very few trees, and almost, only a handful of seating areas. And when I left, we I think quadrupled the amount of green space that had been available on campus. We eliminated, several major surface parking lots right on the academic campus and converted them back to green space. And we built several new parking garages, all with the goal of trying to get surface parking off the main campus and onto the periphery. We also were successful in master planning for the whole concept. I don't know, Michael, if you saw the huge separated bike trail that runs from the Wabash River, right, I'm on the Lafayette River now, from basically right down at the river, all the way out to the new US 231 highway, which was another huge reason why we were able to do so many positive things for pedestrians was when 231 was rerouted around campus instead of right through it. That eliminated US 231, which was on Northwestern Avenue, and also Fowler and Wigan Street in West Lafayette, which goes right along the edge of campus, and State Street, which was State Road 26. That all got eliminated when they built US 231 as a bypass around campus. And that allowed us to totally transform State Street from what had been basically a 4-lane high-speed highway right through the middle of campus, with probably close to 20,000 vehicles a day. We downgraded that to a simple 2-way street. Portions of it had been 1-way also. That allowed us to put in that separated bike path all the way from the river, all the way to the far west edge of campus at the new US 231. And that then became our major east-west spine for bicycle circulation through the campus. That didn't get completed till after I was gone, but all the planning for it, the long-range planning for it started, when I was the director of campus master planning. And again, I'm not taking credit for all of that. That was part of our overall campus master plan from 2009. But it's done now, and it looks great, and it has created a major east-west bike route through the middle of the campus. So then the campus spine, which is that whole area around that connects kind of the big fountain up in front of the administration building, all the way up to the stadium, and then all the way down to the vet school, that became the major north-south spine for bicycle circulation as well. And that was, again, all part of our original master plan from 2009.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I hadn't realized that. Yeah, when I went up there this summer, we drove like next to that path a lot, because we were staying in Lafayette with my grandma, and when we were going towards West Lafayette, we always had to go past that. Okay, what was the biggest roadblock you guys faced?
With regard to bicycle circulation or pedestrian circulation, or
maybe like logistical. I'm thinking more like logistical, like did you have pushback from like the students, or?
Yeah, there's always pushback whenever you make any kind of change, especially in a place that people think and feel is their home, which is totally understandable. We want people to buy in and feel a part of a community. You always have concerns from some who think it's hopeless. Why even try to separate bikes and pedestrians? They're never going to do it. Why waste your time or your resources doing that? You fight that attitude. You also fight the attitude of the others who think exactly the opposite, that, oh, there needs to be completely separated bike paths, from pedestrians and from vehicles. And that's the only way to do it safely. And so we have these two factions at polar opposite ends. And so our goal was to try to find some happy medium, which I think we tried to do, and I think we did successfully. But that's probably the biggest obstacle. The other obstacle, I think, is just one that's inherent on every major research institution in the country, where you're bringing in people from all over the United States and all over the world, where, as I alluded to earlier, everybody has a different mindset about how bicycles should be used. That for some, they think it's, they don't have any rights to be on the road, even though by state law they do, and they are considered vehicles just like a car. They're not supposed to be on sidewalks unless they're 16 years or young or under 16 years of age. But that's not how it is everywhere. And so people come here with all these different views, and so you have to put that you have to try to educate. We always try to approach all this bicycle and pedestrian circulation as a three-legged stool, that you had to, number one, educate, and so that everybody was on the same page, which was very, very difficult. It's the 3 E's: education. Then you had to have the engineering or the infrastructure. So you had to have the facilities. So we had to have adequate bike parking. You have to have adequate bike paths or trails, or some way to safely accommodate all modes of transportation. And you have to have enforcement. And if you only have two of those things, it's not going to work. And, you know, it's also just like back in the 50s and 60s when they were building the interstate highway system. You can't build it all at once. It's very expensive and it's still not done. And I don't know that it ever will be perfect. You know, you have to build it in pieces, and people get frustrated when they see, oh, well, you only built the bike lane from here to here. Well, that's what we were able to do with the funding that we have this year. And so we're able to get that much done. In another year or two, we'll try to address the next phase. And ultimately, after years of doing this, you hope to have an integrated, fairly well-connected bicycle circulation system. It changes though. And that's that frustration, which is, again, like you said, one of the obstacles, again, is inherent in the fact that we're dealing with a college campus where every 4 years, it's a whole new group of people on campus, and they all need re-educated every time. And they all need to understand the enforcement, they all need to understand the engineering, and they all need to understand that where you are right now is just a snapshot of where we have been and where we hope to go. And you may or may not be there for the end product. So that's the world of planning for everything, you know, built in a day. You have to take time, you have to have a plan, and you have to work towards it. And as long as you have a big vision plan, which I think we did, and as long as you are working, you know, with the best of intentions to implement that plan, and it's not just sitting on a table somewhere or in a file cabinet somewhere, I think people tend to be understanding.
If you had to improve anything that, or well, if you had to do it again, what would you have improved? What would you have done differently?
Oh boy. I think it took us a long time at Purdue, I think, to a position where again, I'm not speaking of the current administration, but past administrations. I think every administration has a different view on engagement with the campus community. Some want all kinds of engagement and input and feedback. Other administrations, not so much. And so I think when I started, bicycles weren't considered an issue. And then it started to become obvious that more and more were appearing on campus. It was becoming more and more of a problem. And so at that point, then I think it would have been good to, you know, probably engage more of the campus community earlier on, rather than waiting till it got to a crisis, you know, to start to address it. Because in the 90s, we had a similar issue like Mitch Daniels encountered when he got here. And you know, it kind of forced the administration to really be serious and take a look at it. And so we did. But again, just as the student population changes every handful of years, the same is true with the administration. And every administration has a different viewpoint about those things. I doubt it's much different for cities either, where administrations change in cities. So.
Sorry, somebody just walked in the room I'm in.
That's okay.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Briggs, Dr. DeRitter, do either of you have questions that you want to ask?
I have a little bit. Briggs, what do you got? Because you guys are the important people here.
No, I was just going to say, I haven't actually been thinking about asking questions. I've been over here typing away on my computer, taking notes, taking notes vigorously. So I haven't had any chance to think about a question. I apologize.
Well, so one thing I was curious about, you mentioned that, you know, you need the education, engineering, and enforcement. So enforcement for you guys on Purdue's campus, does this wind up meaning mostly campus police, or who does it?
Okay, so that was another, and I'm not sure where they are with all that today. But when we did it, yes, the police had to be involved. You know, we did try to do made huge efforts at trying to get folks to register bikes, which, you know, I don't think they were ever terribly successful in getting. I mean, that's the case everywhere. I'll bet 9 out of 10 bikes you encounter are not registered anywhere in the country, if I had to guess. But the police have made it clear to us from the very beginning they were never going to get in high-speed, you know, bike race chases, trying to track down someone who didn't stop at a stop sign, or, you know, who rode their bike on a sidewalk instead of a bike path. So what we tried to, I think that what we tried to use was we tried to be a little more soft-handed approach to it, where we encouraged folks to just let people know at the beginning of the school year, the incoming first-year students, that, hey, at Purdue, we have a culture of being respectful, and we have a culture of abiding by the rules. And, you know, this is how it happens on campus. This is how we all work together to make the place safe and a good place for everyone to be. And so we encourage you to pay attention to the bicycle and pedestrian safety rules and regulations. You know, every year the exponent would typically write a story about it. You know, on occasion they would have, I don't recall if it was police officers or if it were, I don't remember who, it might have been, there was a student security task force and a group, I think, of some kind, of, maybe they might have helped, as I recall, or at least we talked about that. No one really wanted to do the enforcement because no one wanted to be the bad guy, but we would on occasion position police at the beginning of the school year, as I recall, where they would stop people who were riding their bikes through sidewalk areas and high traffic pedestrian zones and say, hey, this is a walk your bike zone, you know, please dismount your bike and walk through here, or hey, please try to stay on the bike path. I don't ever recall that we ever wrote a citation for it, but there had to be rules and regulations, and, you know, we did have to try to educate folks that, you know, your bike. The one area where we did enforce stuff was bicycle parking. If parked their bike on a handrail that was also an accessible path, or, you know, accessible ramp into a building, we would remove them, and they would have to then go get their bike, and then in the process they might, I don't remember if there was a fee associated with that or not, but they at least got an opportunity to be educated, you know, that look, when you're parking your bike on a handrail, when there's, you know, 30 bicycle parking spaces 50 feet away, you know, you're impacting a student or a faculty or a staff member or a visitor to campus who needs those handrails to be able to get up into a building. And it's just, again, it's just a matter of respect.
Mm-hmm. One other question I had was, how did the task force members have time to do all of this work? Like, was it counted as part of your service requirement, or did you just kind of have to figure it out because it was the right thing to do? Or
so again, I don't recall who all was. I do recall one person who was on that bicycle task force, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he's one of the deans at the college and the university today. He was a bicyclist, and he was a faculty member, and so, I mean, when the president says he wants a task force created, then faculty and staff are given the permission to spend time doing whatever they need to do to accomplish the goals of that task force. And if students were involved, you know, they probably counted it towards their you know, maybe it's on their resumes for, you know, work that they did while they were, you know, in student status, but that was for the benefit of the whole campus community. But I never, you know, tracked any time or anything on it. It was just part of my job. And I think that's how everybody kind of saw it. It was just part of their responsibility as being part of the campus community.
All right. Yeah. And the only other thing that occurred to me was not so much a question, but just is interesting. was thinking to myself, attractive green spaces, such as you didn't have so much when you got there, might be seen, as a type of kind of non-essential amenity enabled by, exploding tuition costs and student fees, and especially by folks who tend to pine for the good old days of cheaper public higher education in the United States. And I'm wondering whether, that sort of idealized era of low-cost college education had at least this one dark side, that the campuses were much more car-centric than they are now. And it never occurred to me before to think about that way.
Yeah, I guess I would just say part of the reason I believe, and I think there have been studies that have shown this, that that students choose, or their parents choose, help them choose what university to attend, is based on how the campus looks and how safe they feel when they're there. So I would disagree. I mean, I think green space is critical for a campus. I mean, especially if you're a world-renowned research institution like Purdue. If all it is a very dense campus with nothing but buildings and parking lots or parking garages and no green space, it's not a very enjoyable environment, I don't think, to live, work, or play. People are spending huge portions of their life out on these campuses when they're here, and so we want them to want to be there and enjoy it. That was always our mindset. I think the aesthetic factor, I think, made a big difference in Purdue's appeal. And again, I will tell you, by comparison to other Big Ten schools, the amount of green space we have is still very small. But the green space we have is very nice now. And when I say green space, I should clarify, that's public outdoor space that's attractive and not a surface parking lot.
Right.
Some places it may be a wide plaza, or it may be a bike lane or a sidewalk. It's not all just big open green space. It's attractive campus space. And Michael, if you ever come back to Purdue, contact me, and I would love to walk you around campus and talk to you about all the things that changed over the years, because it was transformative. And certainly you're probably aware that at least while Mitch Daniels has been president, they haven't raised tuition for the entire 10 years he's been on campus. So he touts the affordability feature a lot, and yet we still have a beautiful campus. Granted, much of that was done before he got here, but there has still been a lot that's been done since he's been here.
Yeah. So I have like one more question, and then I think we'll basically be good. So how would you translate the process that you had to, say, like a small town that wouldn't necessarily be like a college town?
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely, I think, more difficult, because when you're on a college campus, you have students who are active and typically young, and they want to use the means of transportation. I think it's the same general concept, though. You engage the community. You talk to them. You educate them about the benefits of bicycle circulation, and show them examples of other communities where this not only helps as far as provides another mode of transportation for some people who may not want to drive or aren't really able to walk long distances, or that this is a great way to get around in a safe, effective way, assuming the infrastructure is there to support it. So you talk with the right people, you get their feedback, their input, you try to educate the community, and you also talk to them about, show them examples of other places of successful communities where bicycles have been happily and successfully integrated into their infrastructure, and typically been nothing but positive. I'm guessing even from an economic development standpoint, it's a positive thing. Why would you want to keep one mode of transportation completely out of your community? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, honestly.
One more thing though, that I can't remember your teacher's name who just left a minute ago, but the other thing about the green space factor is, and that people want auto-dominated spaces. I don't think most people want auto-dominated spaces unless it's, unless they're going to Walmart or or a big box store where they want to go in and out quickly. If you're coming to a campus, I think most people want to be able to enjoy that. Yes, they want to be able to get to their parking space and get safely to their building. But, the whole car domination of our society and our infrastructure happened after World War II, as the automobile, became more and more integrated into our everyday way of life. But since the 80s, late 80s, 90s, the whole goal has been trying to make it to even things out so that it's not all just about automobile circulation, but that we also safely accommodate pedestrians and bicycles, because the whole country has gone from, auto domination to, more of a, what we call a complete street, where all modes of transportation get equal attention. It's not all about just the car and everybody else is a secondary thought.
Yeah, let's hope that happens. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. I know I've already asked you this, but who else should we talk to? Is there anybody in particular?
Well, if you want to stay focused on Purdue, I would encourage you to talk to the folks at Purdue today. Aaron Madrid is the, I think he's called supervisor of transportation today, but when I was, right after I left, he became, I think, the bicycle pedestrian coordinator. So he might still be in that role, I don't know. But check him out. I think his email is Madrid, MADRIDA @purdue.edu. You might reach out to him. And, if you want to chat with folks in either city of West Lafayette or Lafayette, I can certainly put you in touch with folks here at the city of Lafayette. I have a coworker right across the hall who is our city's pedestrian and bicycle coordinator, and she, I'm sure, would be happy to chat with you too.
I'll definitely reach out. Okay, do you have any questions for us, like about what we're doing or about the class in general?
Yeah, so you're trying to implement some of these what I call complete street infrastructure ideas in your hometown, is that right? Or the town where your school is?
Yeah. My hometown is about 3 hours from here.
Okay, but where the school is located, which is Sparksville?
Hartsville.
Hartsville.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. And how big of a city is it, or community?
It's pretty small. It's on the smaller side, definitely. I want to say it has around, I want to say around 7,000 people.
Okay. And does it have a vibrant downtown? A small commercial area?
It's pretty small,
okay,
but they're definitely on their way to becoming a lot more of like a community. Like they're still working on like becoming that unified sense of like
right.
And
have either of you ever been to Greenville, South Carolina?
Yeah, I have. I live actually pretty close to Greenville.
Yeah, I'd encourage them to go visit a place like Greenville and say, look what we could do here. I mean, that's an amazing city as far as what they've done in their downtown area anyway. So again, examples are what are, I think, especially if you can find other small communities like your community there that have done these kinds of things effectively. There's not a small university in your town, in the town, is there? It's just
It's right across the street. It's a Collier University.
Okay. And are they connected in any way to a bike system to the community at all? Or is they kind of insulated and have their own system?
I don't know.
Their campus is very it's very pedestrian centric. And as
Mhm.
soon as you step foot off campus, it is almost all car or pedestrian. As for the downtown, there are like 2 blocks where it's a lot of restaurants, like a pretty bustling downtown for about 2 blocks. But then after that, it's all it's all just like residential, and then it just continues to spread out from there.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get anywhere using a mode of transportation that is not a car, unless you're like a government school student like us, or maybe a Coker College student. That's what the university is called. Because you can walk. It's like a 5 to 10 minute walk into town. But if you live in town, you're gonna have to take a car.
Right. And so is the traffic bad enough in a town that small that the traffic, I mean, where I'm going is, in a lot of cities, including here in Lafayette, we do a thing called share the road arrows, sharrows, they're called for short. Are you familiar with those? Basically a bicycle symbol with 2 like chevrons above it that look like arrows. And that's called a share the road arrow. And even if that community, the only cost is paint or thermoplastic, whichever they have, to put on the road. But it means that bicycles understand that, and vehicles understand that bikes are allowed on the street. If they don't have the infrastructure for a separated bike lane or a bike path and wide enough to accommodate bike parking and bike routes and cars, then do a sharrow. And just educate the community through the media that, hey, when you see this symbol, it means that bikes are going to be sharing the road with you. And so you all can live and work together safely. I would strive for ways to find the key destinations in your community, like the downtown, the college, the schools, and the parks. And then look for logical ways to connect them up with either using existing streets where maybe they're wide enough that they could accommodate a 5 foot or 6 foot wide bike lane on each side, or a separated bike path on the sidewalk next to the sidewalk, or a sharrow situation on the city street itself, and just look for opportunities for connection. Connectivity is the key to a successful bicycle infrastructure program. And it's going to take a while to do it, as I said.
I think I will keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But I'm out of questions. Briggs, do you have anything else now?
Sorry, I have 2 screens. That's why I'm looking over here, because you guys are on the Zoom over that way. So I was trying to find the unmute button. I do not have any questions, but thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us today. It's been really informative, and we really appreciate the time that you took. We learned a lot, and we are really excited to take some of the lessons that you have shared with us today and apply that to our class.
You're welcome. Yeah. My pleasure. Happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you so much. If I have more questions I want to ask you, I'll reach out, I'll email you, call you.
For sure. And again, I honestly, if you're ever in town again, look me up and I'd be happy to walk you around the campus and downtown, because now I work for the city of Lafayette.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's my job now. I'm the assistant director for economic development. So I work with the folks who do basically planning for the city.
Nice.
The other side of the river from the campus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thank you. See you later.
Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and thank you again for talking with us.
You're welcome. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.